Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Thurrott, and I am here today with my good friend, Stephen Rose. Hello, Stephen.
Howdy. How are you?
Uh, Stephen and I have known each other for decades, back from his work at Microsoft. I think we met in the build up to Windows 7 or right after Windows 7 came out, somewhere around then.
Yep. Yeah.
And, we've kind of been friends ever since. I think I fell in love with this guy pretty much immediately. And if you've ever seen him speak, I think you'll know why. But, since the pandemic, work travel kind of fell apart. And when I had the opportunity to go to Seattle about a year and a half ago, Stephen was one of those people I wanted to see. And I had an out of body experience with him because he was describing a condition that I recognized all too well in myself. And we kind of went on this journey where, you've really helped and mentored me since then, honestly, on this kind of path to understanding neurodiversity and what's going on with me and with you, right? Which is
Yeah.
um, very, very interesting and personal, and it's a little weird, and I know for people our age, it's a tough topic, but that's why we wanted to get together today and talk to it because there's no shame here, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just for people of a certain age like us, we grew up in kind of a different world, and that world is changing. I think for younger generations, this is not maybe the blocker that it is for people our age. But I think that's why we need to talk about it and just kind of get it out in the open. And I suspect many of the people who listen to this or watch this are going to see this in themselves as well.
Yeah. It's interesting because it has been quite a path for me over the past few years. And we'll talk about this in a little
Mhm.
while, but I almost lost my job and didn't
Right.
know why I couldn't do what I needed to do. And took a step back and went through this. And since kind of going through this journey and understanding neurodiversity and what that is, have met so many other people and I start to talk with them and they're like, "Oh my God, that's me too." And it's been
Right.
incredibly satisfying. But I think, the reason to do this show now is it is the beginning of the year and many people
Hmm.
make New Year's resolutions. I want to get healthier, I want to eat better, whatever that is. But a lot of folks do not make a pledge to support their mental health. And we think it would be great to kind of talk about neurodiversity, especially since many of you in this industry are neurodiverse. When I go to a conference, I
Yep.
meet a lot of neurodiverse people.
I didn't know what to call it at the time, but as long ago as the mid 1990s, I recall going to Comdex and then
Yeah.
CES and looking out at the sea of humanity, my colleagues, and saying these people are my peers. And I feel a little weird about that, you know? And
Yeah.
in the years since, of course, interacting with Microsoft and other companies in high tech and, um, doing a lot of these kinds of meetings in person or virtually, you see a lot of the same traits around the world.
Yeah.
And, it's very, very interesting. I've long sort of said, without having the right words, that many of the people in our industry in particular are on this, kind of path. That we have very similar character traits. I've said to you, Reese,
That's
for
a
example, I'm sorry, you have
Mhm.
a guitar in
No,
the
no, no.
background there, and that's
Yeah.
something I
Right.
see all the time, right? During COVID, we would do these virtual meetings, and it was striking how many of these people I've known for years in some cases, but now I'm seeing them in their homes, are
Right.
musicians and artists, and writers, and in addition to being maybe programmers or engineers or just involved in personal technology in some way. The
I
overlap
agree.
there was fascinating.
Yeah, and that I think that's a good seg to bring in the slides. So let's do that. So I think this is fascinating. As I was doing my research and I did some of this a few years ago because we have what we call like lunch and learns. And I did a lunch and learn on neurodiversity. Everybody at Microsoft was doing it on a product or something. And I did this for the office org. So, and I had so many people who came up to me afterwards and not only thanked me for doing it, but said, "Hey, I'm neurodiverse. My son is, et cetera."
Mhm.
And they were looking for someone to talk to. So interesting spectrum of folks. And if you think, pick one or two words that you would use to describe some of these people like Simone Biles or Jennifer Aniston or some of these, what kind of words would you use, Paul?
Well, from the outside, obviously, you think brilliant, right? Top of class in their respective fields. What you don't see is the other side of that, I guess, in some cases, although Steve Jobs actually we're pretty familiar with the bad side of Steve Jobs. But
Right.
these people are all iconic.
Yeah, exactly. But our top row all had autism or Asperger's, and if you look at guys like Jerry Seinfeld and Andy
Mhm,
Warhol, that makes a lot of sense. Bill Gates has talked about having Asperger's, ADHD,
mhm,
John F. Kennedy, but you think about someone like Simone Biles, who is so incredibly focused, and what she does to
right.
think about that and how her brain is running. How difficult that must be at times, and dyslexia, Albert Einstein had dyslexia,
Mhm.
and the folks who have come out and talked about it and how they beat it. And I think this is just fascinating because that's none of these are things that you would think about when you think about these people.
No, not at all. I mean, again, in my lack of language at the time, I always thought of this as, people who are really good at one thing, a star basketball player like Michael Jordan or Larry
Right.
Bird, are probably
Yeah.
not very good at many other things, that you almost, it's
Singularly
tilted so
focused.
far. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the term neurodiversity.
Hmm.
And neurodiversity covers a wide spectrum of different um, different things. So dyslexia, trauma, ODD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, OCD. We sometimes refer to people as gifted,
Hmm.
all the way through to things like autism spectrum disorder, Tourette's. Uh, all of these are part of what we refer to as neurodiversity. Neuro meaning many, diversity meaning different. And when you think about some of these terms, especially when you say things like Down syndrome or areas like that, there are certain things that come to mind, and it can be very, very different for many people. But when we talk about the term of neurodiversity today, this is what we're talking about. And specifically, within the terminology, there are three terms. There is whoops, one too many. Neurotypical, neurodivergent, and neurodiverse. So neurotypical is someone who is, not on the spectrum, who is not having one of these. They're just what we put in the middle.
Yeah.
Neurodivergent are folks like Paul and I, people who are different than the rest, and a group of neurodivergent and neurotypical people together creates something called being neurodiverse. So, neurodiverse is the universe we live in and what we do.
Sure.
Anything to add to that, Paul?
Just that I wonder in your case, you can tell me now because I look at my wife and I think, she's neurotypical. There's no doubt about it. We're so different
Same
in
here.
so many
Yeah.
ways. Yeah. And I wonder if there isn't something to that, if two neurodivergent people might not be great matches necessarily. You almost, in some cases, at least for my wife had been trying to get me help along these lines for many years, and was slightly aggravated that I jumped on the chance to get help when you talked about it. But uh, you know, but just coming at it from completely different places. I mean, sometimes I think you need that person in your life who is not ready to run with your mania, if that's what it is, or can
Yes.
counter you in some way.
Although my daughter, it's interesting because
Mhm.
she gravitates towards neurodivergent people, and her tribe is
Yeah. Okay.
neurodivergent because that's where she feels most comfortable. I think in some cases, I don't think you can both be neurodivergent in the same way. I think if you're in
Right.
different ways, but yes, it's very, very hard for my wife having a neurodivergent, husband and daughter, and her being
Yeah.
neurotypical. It's it grinds on her patience on having to
Yeah.
deal with things or saying things 5 times or making sure they have our attention or things along that line, and all of that, and vice versa. It makes me crazy that I'll have to explain myself or can't remember simple things, and will say,
Yes.
"Hi, can you text that to me?" Or, "Can we put that on the calendar because 'cause I'll forget about it." I know it's important. I don't
I
want
mean,
to forget about it. I realize this is important, but I know it will
yeah.
go to the back of my head. So if you do this for me, I can focus on this the way that you would like me to.
My wife is a saint and serves that role as well. I mean, even to the tune of here's the pill you need to take now. You
Yes.
remember that we have a whatever it is on Friday night, that kind of thing. But the tribe is such a great word. I that made me think of the beginning of big tech companies like Microsoft or Apple, where I mean it was absolutely a tribe of people of related skills and mindsets
Right.
running a race together and making something happen, and maybe that
Yeah.
did play a role in their success.
Yeah, I think, you attract you find comfort even subconsciously in other people who are somewhat similar to you because you get each other. All of a sudden, you're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, no, you get this."
right.
I have a thing, when I go to conferences, I know people that stay up till 1 in the morning and drinking and partying. I know that does not work for me. I know that in order for me to get on stage and, for lack of a better term, perform, because it really is. You're not just out there speaking, you
Sure.
are performing. You're educating, you're entertaining, you're giving energy, you're getting energy,
Well, it's
and
interactive
doing
too.
that.
You're thinking, you're not just reading something,
Right.
you're
Yeah,
thinking on
and
your
if
feet
something
and
goes wrong,
yeah.
right, how do you keep going? How do
Mhm.
I set this up for the next person? How do I stay on topic? How do I
Right.
gauge if the audience is with me or not? It's exhausting, and in order for me to do that well, I tell close friends of mine who are aware of what's going on that, hey, at 10:30 or 10 o'clock, I'm done. I'm going to sneak out to go to the bathroom. I'm going to go up to my room. If I
Mhm.
haven't eaten yet, I'm going to order dinner. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to do nothing and reset myself for the next day. I can't go out till
Mm.
midnight or 1 or 2 and then get up the next morning and give that 100% because my brain needs that opposite time from being on. And the thing is, once you're off stage, you're not done. People, and you know this, want to talk
Yeah,
to you and want to meet the persona that is
sure.
Paul or Stephen, not always the human being that is Paul or Stephen.
Hmm. Yeah, I usually apologize to people when they say they were happy to meet me for the first time. It's sure it's a letdown, but it's okay.
Yes. All right, let's take a look at some facts.
Mhm.
20% of the global population is neurodivergent. That's pretty amazing when you think about it for those kind of numbers. 1 in 7 people are neurodiverse at some level, and of course, there is some very mild neurodiversity right through to, dramatic life-changing aspects of that, but
Right.
the levels are different, and some people may have multiple diversity issues going on,
Mhm.
and approximately 5 to 10% of the global population has dyslexia. My daughter has dyslexia, in reading, and then she also has something that, an auditory processing issue that when she hears something, it takes her brain an extra second or 2 to process it and put it down, and she, through training and stuff, has learned to read and also does music,
Wow.
which you would think someone who has dyslexia would have problems with that, but the brain, up to a point, can rewire itself, and I find that fascinating how they
Yeah.
can do that. I remember with the astronauts, they would give them this helmet that would make them see everything upside down and see how long it took till their eyes rectified and put everything right back
Oh,
up
boy.
again. And how the brain would figure that out and do those sort of things is kind
Yeah.
of amazing.
My son is profoundly deaf and has cochlear implants, which help him hear, and, he has that same delay, right? Where he has to process. Hears, listens, kind of translates what he heard into
Right.
what it means in his brain. It takes a second, you know?
Yeah.
It's something he's gotten really good at over the years because, he's had
Yeah.
this situation since he was 2, or 1 rather, I'm sorry. So I completely understand that, but, I also see in people that I know, including my son, interestingly, because my daughter absolutely is neurodivergent rather, and, my
There you
son
go.
is not exactly the same. He's kind of between my wife and I, which you would expect, I guess, but he just has certain aspects to it, right?
Right.
He's someone who maybe needs to take notes, make reminders, and that kind of thing. You see parts of it. So you have,
Right.
when the problem with this, not really the problem, but once you understand this, it's like when you buy a car and you see it everywhere. You'll start seeing this in the people parts of it. No
Right.
doubt about it.
I agree. Yeah, yeah, when you buy a car, all that you think no one else has, all of a sudden when you
Hmm.
start driving, it knows how many other people
They're
have that
everywhere.
and you've never
Yeah.
noticed it before. Yeah.
Yep.
Worldwide, neurodiverse individuals represent 15% of the overall. What is interesting, though, is the unemployment rate for people with autism spectrum disorders was 34%, 1 in 3, and 3 times the rate for people with a disability at 10%. So it is harder for someone with an unseen issue to
Right.
get a job than it is for people that have a seen
I
issue.
I
And to
have a
think
theory about
that
that.
Yeah. What's your theory?
Well, I'm just basing this on my own personality because one of the darker things I've sort of had to cope with over the course of my life is this knowledge that I could get really dark and go over the edge a little bit, right? And I know even I've not done this, thankfully, but with my wife in my darkest moments, I've had this, I could step over the edge here. I could ruin this relationship right now,
Oh, yeah.
that kind of a thing. And I wonder if that isn't part of this, that this is, I don't know how common that is in this audience or whatever, but this inability to, like, you understand logically that you can't go in this direction, but you almost can't stop yourself. It's the person who can't stop from speaking up at work, maybe, or,
Yeah.
raises
Impulse.
issues one too many times,
Yeah.
where everyone else in the room is looking back at you, which actually I've experienced. Um, what a weird coincidence. As I say that, I just wonder. I was reading this earlier, and I was thinking to myself, I wonder if this isn't, part of that.
And I don't disagree. And I think if you have things like low self-esteem or you're shy,
Yeah.
in your brain, and I know I've dealt with this because I've dealt with this through therapy, and we'll talk about therapy and medication, all
Hmm.
that in a little bit, but I would think I would raise my hand because I knew something, and in my head, deep down, I would think, "Hey, if I know these answers and I'm smart, kids will like me more," realizing, no, it's the opposite. They are gonna beat the
Yeah.
crap out of me because I'm showing
Yeah.
off that I know this and they don't,
Right.
and I'm making life more difficult for them. So, what the reality was, how my
Right.
brain saw it as a neurodiverse individual was dramatically different, which ended up getting me beat up and causing me trauma and issues later.
Boy.
And I'll say this, I'm not happy of the bullying and things I had to deal with as a child. It's horrible. And my parents seeing me as a plugger, not really being able to identify what was going on and me struggling in
Yeah.
school and all of this, but it has made me who I am. And so many of the qualities
Mhm.
that have helped me in life have come from having to find ways to deal with all of this stuff. So I'm not saying it's a negative going through it. It's been a positive in the long run, but as you're going through
Yeah.
that journey, it is incredibly difficult, especially if you start feeling like you're the
Well,
only
we'll
one.
we'll get to this, but I mean, being able to compensate for these things is actually a big part of this too. There are
Yeah.
ability to kind of intellectually work around these problems
And
is
it's
definitely part of it.
exhausting doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yes, it is.
Adults with ADHD are 18 times more likely to be disciplined and 60% more likely to lose their job. At Microsoft, I got brought into a new role, um, and I was unable to do what was being asked of me. I was forgetting things and having a problem prioritizing stuff in meetings. Things were coming at me so fast that things were falling through the cracks, and I thought it was just me and I'm getting older and I'm having problems. I found out, you know, earlier that year that I had a pituitary tumor that had shut down
Mm.
my pituitary gland, and I'd gotten some surgery for that and thought maybe that was coming back and went to a doctor and said, "Look, I'm struggling. I have no energy when I get home. I'm
Mm.
not doing well at work. I'm not doing well at home because of this." And he said, "I'm going to give you a medication. And in 3 weeks, either your life is going to line up and things are going to get better or it's not." And it was for ADHD. And it made
Okay.
a world of difference. So,
Interesting.
um, I've lived this and it is terrifying when you come home and fear that, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job and what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And it's not something that you can fully control.
Do you think if you had gone to the doctor even 15, 20 years ago, if you would have had the same conversation?
I don't think I would've because it was looked at so differently
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago.
Right.
I think it is really only since the beginning of really the 2000s, but a little bit further,
Yeah.
that it has been not only acceptable, but encouraged, and we see things like mental health being added to insurance programs. Still not to the level it needs to be. I still
Yeah.
pay thousands of dollars a year for drugs I have to have, but my
Yeah.
daughter can get a year's worth of contacts for free. So, we're not quite at that point yet, and our system for dealing with mental health, is horrible, but yes,
Yeah. It's evolving though.
it would be
And
it is evolving, and it
yeah.
is getting better,
Yep.
but it's not I don't think it would have made that much of a difference then, and the drugs that they had were very simplistic and sort of a one size fits all, which I've
Right.
learned would not have fit well for me.
Okay.
Neurodivergent adults are 9 times more likely to die from suicide than other adults, and I know a bunch of neurodivergent people that deal with, um, depression. I know ones who are bipolar, who can
Mhm.
go from being manic to horribly depressed to that, and, you can absolutely see how if you were to have a problem like I have, how you could go down a dark hole and go, "I'm not making anybody's life better. I'm out of here," and that's
Yeah.
terrifying, and hopefully, if you are one of those people who've thought about it, please reach out to suicide counseling. There are lots out there, but feel free to write either one of us and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, I'm having a tough time. I'm looking for someone to help guide me and connect me with other neurodivergent individuals who can show me that it's not just me," and, it's terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the dark thoughts earlier. I understand. It's,
Yeah.
we all have this, to some degree at some point in our lives. I mean, life does what it does, but yeah, this is maybe the ultimate example of this, dark path, uh, thing that I was talking about earlier. It's one thing.
Yeah.
It is bad enough to ruin relationships or lose your job, or whatever. But once you're, yeah, once you feel so that your life is so unimportant, that's that's a that's definitely
It's hard to come back
time to
from.
get help. Yeah,
Absolutely, and you are not alone, and that's why we're doing this show to say, "Look, what you're feeling is normal, and it's not abnormal, and there's nothing wrong, and there are ways to get help," and hopefully that's what you'll walk away with from this episode.
right.
Um, on the other end, average or above average IQ scores occur in 44% of people with autism spectrum disorder.
Mhm.
Research shows conditions such as autism and dyslexia can bestow special skills in pattern recognition, memory, and mathematics. And we'll talk about that in a few
Yep.
moments. And why? Well, one third of respondents indicated they would not knowingly hire an applicant with a learning disability. And that's terrifying. Where they said, oh, well, this person has a learning disability. I don't think that we can really handle them or take care of them. So we're not going to hire them. And that's yet they would with someone that had a hearing aid or someone who had a prosthetic leg, et cetera. So there is still a lot of stigma around mental health and mental health issues out there.
Yep.
And that's one of the areas that we encourage all of you watching to kind of take a look at and to separate yourself from and hopefully understand better by the end of this. 79% of employees perceive the amount of training and supervision for workers with learning disabilities to be greater than that for non disabled workers. And there are some cases where that could be, but many cases where that is not the case.
Right.
Characteristics. Let's take a look. This is the one that I absolutely love, and I've shown this slide a few times and had so many people going, "Oh my god, that's me." So
Right.
higher or lower sensitivity to certain sensory stimuli. My daughter does not do well with bright lights. There's a hard time with it,
Same.
or when there's too many people talking at once, it's really hard. Or people that are talking in a slightly louder voice. To her, it seems like people are shouting.
Yeah.
Um, highly fixated on specific interests. Hi. Finding difficulty understanding social cues or fitting into social groups. I always say, if you want to find me at a party, I'll be in the back sitting with the pet, the dog or the cat, and petting them and doing that because I don't do well with social cues. I never have. I don't get it. So, yeah. Stimming. I have a little bit of a mild Tourette's, so I'll tend to fidget with my collar or things like that. It's just a self-soothing mechanism. Inclined to structure and schedules. Yes, absolutely. I like to know what we're doing and the order we're going to be doing it and when things are going to happen and when that changes. It is very hard for me to stop and reset and set new expectations, which includes what's the temperature going to be like? What do I need to wear? When will we be eating? Just so I know what to expect. And Paul, you and I had a conversation on this
Yes.
a little
Yes, we
while
did.
back.
Yep.
Go ahead and share your thoughts there on that one.
This is a list that could be called characteristics of Paul. This is I am hitting 100% on this list. And this was the conversation. It was, a year ago, July, I guess, when we
Yeah,
were sitting, the four of us were sitting at the table and you were discussing this topic. And I had an out of body experience. I stopped hearing you for a little while. I was literally floating in space thinking, my God, he has a camera in my house or something. He's describing me.
right.
This is really scary. Um,
Yeah.
Even last night we go to a trivia night thing at a local restaurant, and, I'm trying not to do this now, but I do this thing where I sit there and I kinda rock, you know,
Yeah.
and my legs shake up and down, and my wife says, "Are you cold?" And I said, "No, why?" And she says, "Stop doing that."
Yeah.
And she's like, "You do this every
And you
time we
don't
go
even
out."
realize you're doing
Yeah,
it.
and
I
I'm like, "I
can't
don't
help it.
even
It
I know, I just"
Right.
it's like, "Are you nervous?" I'm like, "What? No, nervous? No, what do you mean?" But
You just have a lot of dopamine and adrenaline going through your system because 'cause you're engaged and you're hyper focused on the
I'm
questions
in a
and what's
room
gonna
with
be
20 people
right.
I know, and,
Yeah.
it's very yeah. I would be surprised if most
Sensory
people
intense.
yeah, I this is, all this stuff. I'm always interested by the language, and not, flapping or stimming behavior rather,
Yeah.
was not a term I was familiar with, but then I see that and I say, "Yeah, no, I get that too." Good.
Yeah.
And, you know, but, yeah, I can, yeah, listen, if you read anything that I write as we're recording this, I'm just about to include a months-long project of organizing photos that I think most people would describe as unnecessary. And,
And, arranging and categorizing things.
oh, yeah, just, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Back
There's
in
a
the days of DVDs, I would have all my
ugh,
DVDs in alphabetical order and
mhm,
then in order of the releases. So the James
yes,
Bonds were all
exactly.
together. But do you put the James Bonds together or do you put them by individual title?
You
This is something that I would
absolutely
struggle
put
with
them
and
together
spend
in
time on.
order of release. Yes.
Right.
This was and
Yeah,
James
you
Bond is a
can't put,
perfect example.
Tomorrow Never Dies in T. It's gotta be with B for Bond. Yeah,
It's not just
exactly. And
that,
you're like,
it's that some of them are great and some of them are not, and you have to have all of them, and
right,
then they have to be very specifically arranged. Um,
exactly.
yep,
And
that's
people would go nuts, and then I would know exactly where movies were, like, "Why not put it back in any order?" I'm like, "I need to know exactly where to find that thing.
yeah,
I
it's
can't
like
have it in any
people
order, that
you
doesn't work."
organize the fork and the knife at the table, or it's everything. The little clock has to be exactly in the right direction or whatever.
Yep.
There's a concept I'm sure you've heard of called doom piling, which I'm awesome at. And doom piling is, cleaning and arranging without actually decluttering. So it's
Yes.
you could think of it as hiding, right? So people could walk into maybe my office or our house or whatever and say, "Wow, this place is really clean." It's like, "No, it really isn't." But
No,
everything is
it's
put
neat,
away so you can't see it. It's neat. It's
right.
been
I
straightened,
am neat, but I am not clean. There's an inch of
right?
dust on shit, but everything is where it
Mhm.
needs to
But it's
be, and then
exactly arranged.
when I
Yeah,
right,
right.
and then when I go to clean, I have to when I if I take everything out, I have to put it back exactly where it was at or rethink, "Does this still make sense?" And it's an all-day thing. Something that would
Yes.
take somebody else an hour, that's all afternoon for me. I'm done.
Oh, yeah.
That's it, because 'cause I'm
That's
gonna
a great
find other
weekend,
things that
honestly, it's
distract.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I am not a good person to move with because 'cause I'm gonna look at every single thing and go, "Oh, I'd forgotten about this, and, oh, I should keep this out." It's just yeah.
Yep.
Alright, easily distracted or over-focused, as you can see we both are. Low
Mhm.
frustration,
Ugh.
absolutely. Preference for nonlinear thought, poor self-image, preference for working or being on their own.
Mhm.
Um, that
I'm a
one's
writer.
interesting. Yeah, I do
You know?
yeah, go ahead.
No, I work at a cave. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
by
me too.
definition, I don't wanna be around other people, you know? I'm a horrible
Yeah.
person to work with, you
Yeah,
know?
I have very specific ways I like things done,
Mhm.
and the problem is the more I work by myself, the harder it gets to break that, but I do have to work with others and have to be very cognizant of that and very accommodating, and,
Right.
yeah, it's a skill I've had to learn. And easily distracted by external stimuli, AKA squirrel, yeah,
Yep, exactly.
absolutely.
Like a cat with a laser
Just
pointer. "Oh, what's that?" It's
right,
just it Yep.
exactly. Bad. I love this quote. This came from Harvard Business Review, and they did a whole thing on neurodiversity as a competitive advantage. But there was a comment that the
Mm,
author and scholar in residence made, and he said many individuals who embrace the concept of neurodiversity believe that people with differences do not need to be cured. They need help and accommodation instead, and we couldn't agree more. Neurodiversity is not something that we need to go find a cure for. These people and that feel that way, it concerns me that they look at it the same way that we look at a birth defect or something
right.
along that line. And even then, there are certain birth defects that have helped people to become even more the amazing person that they are
Like
than they could have
dimples.
been.
People love dimples.
Yes,
That's a birth defect.
it is.
Yeah. No, yeah, this is very interesting. I think, there's a double-edged sword to, being neurodivergent, right? There's a gift and then there's, a problem,
Yeah.
depending on where
Yeah,
you
and
are.
right, and this is a perfect example of it. The, IDF Special Unit, they had a group that was there for analyzing aerial and satellite photography. They found people
Mhm,
on the autism spectrum, and they found that they spotted patterns that no one else could see, and that their abilities were
mhm.
off the charts compared to neurotypical people, because they would see things that looked out of place, that the balance was slightly off or something was different, and they could feel it and then dig in where someone else would not necessarily see that. So the
Yep,
pattern recognition, looking for patterns and numbers, why so many of them make great developers, that's a big part of it. And it is part of being on the spectrum and having those issues.
yep, definitely. This is the eyes in the back of the head syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. So neurodivergent people have the ability to recognize where they can flourish. Hey, I'm good at this. I'm not good at this. And I say this to people, and they're like, well, you could be good at it. I'm like, no, I know I can't do that. I
Right.
am not good at that. And I've tried it, didn't work out. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to get better at that because these are the things that I am good at and where I'm going to go. They bring diversity into projects that companies can result in really unique, interesting ways of thinking. You take a look at Steve Jobs and how he thought, and the things that he came up with were
Mhm.
so, people say, out of the box, but it was really being neurodivergent that allowed him to look at things go and say, why not? When others were saying, oh, you have to have a keyboard. Go, why?
Why?
And they would explain to me,
Yeah.
and he goes, yeah, that you're still not explaining why I don't need it. And,
Yeah,
it
this
was
is the
because of the way
ability.
that he looked at things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, this is the ability to kind of see past, tradition almost.
right.
Sometimes we forget why we do things a certain way, and no one really questions it, you know? And years and decades go by, and it takes a brain like that to finally walk in the room and say, "What are we doing here? And, could someone tell me why?"
Yeah.
And no one
Yeah.
can. Yeah.
High levels of imagination, detail to, pay attention to complex detail, looking at different types of information. And in the workplace, they find that many people not only boost productivity, but they ask that question, why? Why? And that's such an important thing. So, I'll leave it with this and then we'll talk about our own journeys, which is if you can't see
Mhm.
well, you get glasses. If you're
Right.
diabetic, they give you insulin. If you can't hear, you get a hearing aid. You lose a limb, you get a prosthetic one. But if you can't make neopinephrine or dopamine, you're penalized. And it's rough. Or you feel ostracized and you need to feel about your neurodiversity the same way that someone that just needs to go get glasses needs to do it. It is just part of your life and one of those things that you need to do. But insurance companies make it difficult. They make you feel penalized. And
Right.
I know with certain drugs that I'm on, I've had to wait weeks to get it and I'm forced to switch to another one and how
Yeah.
that wrecks my system. And it's absolutely insane. So, with that, let's just talk, you and I, about our own journey and kind of
Yeah.
what we've done and how we've gotten to this point.
Well, a rough journey for me, but you got there first. I mean, what was it the job troubles that was the catalyst?
Yeah,
You got the
that was it.
medication?
It
Yeah.
was that. So I went into my doctor and I talked with him, and
Mhm.
he gave me Adderall and said, "You need to go see a therapist and you need to go see a psych." I'm like, "Okay,"
Yeah.
but
How
he got
long
me
ago
on
was this, by the
Adderall.
way?
It's about 5, 6 years ago now,
Okay.
and within a week, things were lining up. I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm able to remember things. I'm seeing clearly," and removing some of the stress that I was building up over it, that combination of the anti-anxiety and that was huge. Um,
Mm.
but I found that after a few months, some of the things would wear off, so it was working with my psych on how do I continually balance that. It was going to a longer acting drug, so getting off of Adderall and going to something called Vyvanse.
Right.
I also talked to my daughter who was taking some of these drugs and how they helped her and what really did well. And then it was seeing a therapist to deal with some of the guilt and issues and things that I was feeling and some trauma from being bullied as a child that
Mm.
allowed me to sort of get to a really good place where not only was I managing this, but I wanted to help others manage it because I didn't realize how bad it was until I was completely out of it and looking back like, "Oh my god, I was being unfair to my job, unfair to me, unfair to my family." I'd come home from work and I had no energy for anything, and
Yeah.
I wasn't present, and I didn't
Right.
like not being able to be present.
Yeah. I have these instances in my life I can point to now with greater clarity than I had at the time. But the one example, and I believe it was either 2016 or 2018. We were in Paris. It was my wife and I and our daughter, and we went to Père Lachaise Cemetery, and we went in through one of the back entrances, not the main entrance. And there was a sign, there was a map of the thing. And the part I don't remember is how it was organized, but in my brain, this was wrong and it didn't make any sense. And I just did what I always do. And I blurred it right into anger, immediate, explosion of, and I said, why that would, this be blah, 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 whatever. Right. My wife, who was a
Right.
sane, calm person and smart, said, I think it's arranged this way because of whatever. I don't remember the way. And I said, "Oh, yeah, no, I can see that." And my daughter
Sure.
is standing back and she says, "Excuse me, did anyone else see this?" And I said, "What?" She says, "You just exploded." And then she explained why, and you calmed right down. And to me at the time, I thought, well, yeah, but that's my superpower, Kelly. I said, I can escalate really quickly, but when confronted by the truth or the facts or whatever, I'm good. And to me at the
Yeah.
time, I thought, this is great. Because I'm not just going off the handle. I can, I can listen to reason and whatever. But I see that slightly differently now. I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
It
but I'm sorry.
That structure is so important, and that's something where I need to know what is expected of me and what's gonna happen, and when things change, it
Right.
is difficult for me because 'cause I'm like, I know what to do. I know where I need to be. I know the next step and the step after that, and that's what's important for me. I don't like being at a point where I'm
I
like, I don't know what's next. My wife will say, "Why don't we just go drive to this part of town and go check it out?" I'm like, "Well, what's there?" She goes,
Yeah.
"I
I'd be
don't
like,
know."
nope.
And I'm
You
like,
gotta.
"I don't
Yeah.
wanna go there and not find something I don't like or this and that.
Right.
Let's do some research and do it." And she sees that as me, "Oh, no, you're not any fun." And I'm like, "No, I can be." And then what I'll do is I'll go out on my own, go research someplace,
Hmm.
find out all the stuff that's there, and I'll say, "Hey, let's go do a day here." And she's like, "Well, you don't do it when I suggest it." And I'm like, "'Cause I did some research. I found out what's there. I know what to expect. I know what the weather's gonna be, how long we're gonna drive, places to eat, 2 or 3 places that I'm gonna like and enjoy to go to, as well as ones that you are gonna like." So I now know what to expect, and now that I know, I can dress and act and be appropriate as
Yeah.
opposed to walking into a situation cold. And it's not that I can't do it, but it I have a limited battery, and not knowing what's gonna happen and being thrown into that situation is gonna use most of it, which doesn't leave much left over for the things that I have to do, like drive back home when we're done or things along that line. And eating and sleeping and doing things at around regular times for me is also important for my mental and physical health. I'm a diabetic as well, so those
Yeah.
kinda go hand in hand for me.
I reduce things like this to pithy little phrases. So my thing is always, I hate change. you know, which is a very concise way of saying what you just said in a way, right? It's I can't deal with the situation being different. I also don't like it when I'm fully booked, whether it's during the week for work or for a weekend. We have something this coming week on a Friday night and something on Saturday night. I'm like, there goes my weekend, you know,
Right.
which is goofy because I'm doing things with people I love and I should look forward to that. But even though I know what the schedule is, it's pretty clear cut. I'm still like, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just not right for me. I don't know.
And what's interesting is dealing with change, yet you are in an industry and you are wrapped around things that are changing and are different and are
I know.
progressive and telling people, hi, here's technology you should perhaps look at and leverage and not leverage, which is kind of the opposite about how you are on personal things. And that's what's interesting too, is you can be doing a job, whether you're a developer or these sort of things, and have one set of
Yeah.
perspectives that are completely the opposite of how you feel about those things
Well,
sometimes in your own life.
I
The
I
separation's interesting.
I that sounds like I'm a professional hypocrite, which I like because I am. But also, it might explain the frustration of technology for me, right? I express that as technology has never failed me, which is I say with a sarcasm, because it has always failed me, right? But the fact that things never work properly, always work differently, is not what you expect in this world of ones and zeros, which is what attracts
Right.
people like us to this technology, to this field. And confronted by the reality of it, it's a lifetime of frustration, right? I mean, in some ways, I'm in the perfect place, but in some ways, I'm also in exactly the wrong place. It's the central hypocrisy, I'll call it, or it's just no, it's just what it is. I don't know.
It is. So, your daughter and your son, how did they and your wife, as
Yeah.
you started down this journey and started on medication and all the other
Mhm.
things, how did you talk to your family about this and them to you, and how has your relationship with them changed?
So this actually started with my daughter. She went to college and was always tired and couldn't focus. Had a big test coming up, and a friend of hers. This is a classic college story when you think about it. Said, "Here, take this pill. This will make everything better." And God bless her, she took it. But she noted, and it was either Vyvanse or Adderall. I don't remember, but um, she noticed that she actually could focus, and she studied, and she did great on the test. And she said, "I need to talk. Tell me, explain to me what this is." And or not a roommate, but a friend of hers at college had ADHD and was on medication. And so she went to a therapist and then a doctor and was prescribed this herself, and it made a big difference. And my reaction to this at first was negative because we're in the suck it up generation. We're those middle aged guys. We were never getting help for this kind of thing. And
Right.
I could learn to suck it up. How come you can't learn to suck it up? That kind of thing. No daughter of mine. Whatever. And it took me a little while to get over this. But the thing is, my wife and I would have a conversation about this, and I said, "Well, explain to me how we know she has this. What are the traits?" And she would
Yeah.
list. It was like that slide you had earlier. Was like,
Yeah.
"Bup, bup, bup," and I was like, "Okay, but you're describing me. I mean, why does Kelly have this?"
Right.
And she says, "No, you don't understand. This is the same thing." And that's a
Right.
horrifying moment as a parent, right? Understanding that maybe you played some genetic role in this happening with her, but
Yeah.
um, is a new level of guilt for everybody to consider. But my wife spent, a couple of years, I would say, trying to convince me, and sometimes being a little passive aggressive about it. I talk about how she's always been very good about, here's what we're doing. Remember, don't forget it's someone's birthday or this is happening, whatever.
Right.
She would make an appointment for me and come home from the doctor and say, "Hey, I got you an appointment." I said, "Wait, wait, wait, hold on a second. I'll do this on my own time." And I think I needed time to kind of come to grips with it. And by the time I saw you that July, and and you were telling your story to us at the table, like I said, I I drifted off. I don't know how else to say it. I was consumed by what you had said and realizing that this was the same thing. My wife, yeah, and to be clear, she's being funny with this too. I mean, was
Yeah.
upset because she had spent so much time trying to
Trying to point
convince
this
me.
out to you,
So
and
you
you would
talked to
not listen.
Steven for 10 minutes and now you're going to the doctor. You know,
Yeah.
um, So that was a funny moment, but, it still took a little while, right? I'm a procrastinator,
Yeah.
that factors in.
And I would call
Um,
you or text you every
yes,
few
you
weeks.
would.
"How are things going? Did you see the doctor?" And we'd get on calls once a month. And this is important that if you are someone who is neurodiverse and you are dealing with it is,
Yeah.
helping someone else through that and saying, "Yep, how is this going? You may wanna
Yes.
change your med. How are you feeling about this? Have you lost some weight because of this? How are you looking at
Yeah.
things differently?" And just seeing that progress is
I
huge.
yeah, that I'd have to really think about the timing, but between that July and the time I finally went to the therapist first, um,
Mhm.
a bunch of things happened. There was a big job change where I was
Yeah.
separating from the
Yeah, you were
company
going
and
through a huge amount of change.
yeah, we were gonna sell the house, right, and downsize. We these are excuses in a way because life happens. It doesn't matter. You could pick any point in time and things are going on or whatever. But there was a bunch of big stuff. But by the time we got to the middle of last year, I had resolved a bunch of different things for myself personally that are health related. I was going to go and get on top of my blood sugar. I don't want to become diabetic. I was going to get on top of my weight. I want to lose weight and feel better about myself. And part of it was the mental health aspect. My wife, again, to her credit and to her saintlyhood, accompanied me to the therapist each time, and also to the doctor because when you go to medical doctors and they ask you questions and you answer them, they don't trust you, right?
Right,
Are you drinking a lot of alcohol? No, I never drink at all, right? That's what they used to is people just kind of lying. And I
right,
wanted her there to be in both cases to say, no, this is what's happening, right? Because I'm here to
right.
tell the truth because I want to do the right thing for myself. And so I eventually was tested, and it's one of those. I'm not a genius. I'm just an average guy or whatever, but intelligent enough that I could overcompensate my whole life for these things that were going on with me, and this test shows this, right? She pointed very explicitly to certain things. Pattern matching, like you said, was part
Mhm.
of it, and wrote a report which I gave to my doctor, and she prescribed Adderall, which I started taking. You think about the timing on this. I guess it was July, right at the end of June, beginning of July. We were in Mexico for the month, and I started taking Adderall and noticed differences immediately, right? And there were funny things and whatever, but I have always had these kind of freakouts, like that time at the cemetery with the map, and
Yeah.
those instances have gone down dramatically. In fact, I honestly can't think of any fairly recently anyway. Um, and we were flying home from that trip and sitting in the airport, and people had started lining up at our gate, even though it was half an hour or more before they were going to start
Right.
boarding. And I said, this is weird. I said, "Oh, look at these guys." I'm like, why would they go up there right now? And my wife's like, "Are you joking?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She says, "You're the first one in line every time. This is the only time
Right.
I've known you that you weren't there first." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." You know, so
I
you
would
kind of
rather be 3 hours early than 5 minutes late.
exactly. Exactly. Yep. Over prepared is always better than underprepared, you know.
Right.
So I mean, for me, I look, I've always had good moments of productivity and so forth. This has been a bonanza half year or whatever for productivity. It's been good. Some real moments of clarity, which I really appreciate, obviously. I've had some frustrating times as well. I mean, in the, I'm a writer. And so, you experience, I'll just call it writer's block for lack of a better term, but this frustrating experience where it's a hard topic and you want to make sure you get it right. And you spend a lot of time going back and forth, working on that. But I've also had, I mean, incredible bouts of productivity, which is very exciting, for me, honestly. I mean, I
Yeah.
love it. So,
One of the things that it's helped me is knowing when to also say, "This is good enough." For me, nothing was. I would
yeah, I
continue to
agree.
work on something until I felt it was perfect, and it would never quite
Mhm.
be there, but unfortunately, would then turn around and go, "Oh my god, I just spent 8 hours on this, totally lost
Yeah.
track of time and still 3 other things to do, and now I've gotta get those done in less time." It has helped me better to get to a point where I set an alarm. I block out time to do things on my calendar. My calendar is not just for meetings, but an hour on this, 2 hours on this,
Yeah.
and I get to that point, an alarm comes up, and I go, "You know what? This is good enough. I'm gonna leave it here. I'll take a look at it again
Mhm.
in a week, but I'm in a really good place. I don't need to continue with
And
this." And it comes down to, am I gonna add more value to this
yeah,
if I continue to work on it? And I go, "I probably won't."
what you just said is very smart. And it's probably not just for writing, but I approach everything from that perspective. But walking away from something and giving it time, your brain works in mysterious ways. Our brains, not your brain, not all our brains.
Yeah.
And everyone has had this experience where you're in the shower driving, you're like, oh, that's that thing I couldn't think of, or the whatever. And
When
I
you
do
don't
this,
think about it, it allows the other parts of your
and then
brain to
you
come forward and
then you
talk.
fix it,
Right.
right? Yep. So I don't do this explicitly, but I walk away from something I'm in the middle of writing, and maybe it's nighttime to go out to dinner or watch a movie or whatever it is, and the next morning I sit down and I go, "That's it," and then
Right.
that thing that you've done, whatever it might be. Again, for me, it's writing, but is all the better for it. And I guess you could have rushed it, and I guess you could have belabored it for a week. But sometimes it's just that little pause where you can kind of look at it with fresh eyes and say, "Yeah, there you go."
Yeah,
That's
or, "You know what? This isn't working. I'm trying to put a square peg in a round hole. I should just start over again." I
hmm
think the other thing too for me was sleep.
yeah.
Um, because of the issues I had when I would go to bed, my subconscious would continue to work on the
Oh
things
God,
that my
yes.
conscious was working on during the day. So I'd get really crappy sleep. I wouldn't sleep well.
Right.
Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with an answer or something like that. And I learned I need to spend the time before I go to bed doing something that is completely unrelated to my day, whether it's watching something humorous or reading a book or
Right.
playing a game or doing something, but I have to do something that is, and that really led me to work-life balance. At Microsoft, my whole thing was I would not check email after 9:30 at night
hmm
unless there was something huge that I needed to keep track of. I would
Right.
not respond to emails before 8 in the morning from Friday at 5. until Sunday at 3, that was my time, and I would not respond. And there are, of course, exceptions to that. When I go on vacation, I turn off Outlook stays on, but I turn off the alarms telling me
Yes.
that there's email, and I go in every morning for an hour, check email, do stuff, and then that's it for the rest of the day. I realized how much I need to unplug and have that other time and do things that are not related to work, which is even harder when you work for yourself because you feel like I'm not making
Oh,
any
this is a
money or
huge
moving forward.
obligation.
You have
Yep.
Yeah, but you
Huge
have
obligation.
to because then when you sit back down, you have the energy, the focus that you
Mhm.
need to do that. And if you are staying up till 1 or 2 in the morning and doing that, you're gonna miss obvious things. You are not being your most productive, and you're running that engine at top gear, and it
Yeah.
will break down at some point.
This is true of physical health as well. If you go to the gym, you'll see people just kind of sitting on equipment. Now, granted, some people will literally be sitting there scrolling through Facebook or something, and they're not really working out. But there is this notion of rest between repetitions, and
Yeah,
that's healthy and important. It's the resting is in many ways is as important to what you're doing as the actual lifting of weight, and I think
yeah,
that's
the
true for
recovery.
the mental stuff. Yeah, there are times when I would say from Sunday night through Thursday night we watch a couple of hours of TV at night, and when I say that out loud, it sounds like, "Oh my god, you're wasting your time. You're never gonna look back and wish you had watched more TV," but there's an important winding down of the brain activity that
Yeah,
occurs. You're not doing something interactive on purpose. It's really to go from that daytime high down to where you can go to
right,
sleep and your brain isn't full of, "Oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this,"
right.
that kind
And your body gets used to that. At 9, I
Yeah.
watch some shows with my wife. 9:30, I go upstairs, I give treats to all the pets. We do a thing, they all jump up on the bed, I give them all treats, it's very
Nice.
cute.
Yeah.
And then I get ready for bed, and by 10:30, I'm in bed. Then I watch something. I'll watch part of a movie, part of a
Mhm.
documentary, something that I'm interested in. I'll read a
Yeah.
book, but nothing that has to do with my job. And I have
Right.
a light that dims over the hour. And when the light goes off, I'm tired, I'm yawning, and I fall asleep immediately because I've trained my body. Hey,
Oh,
okay, now it's time, and the brain goes, "Oh, okay, it's time to wind down. You're done with all that and time to go to sleep." It's hard for me when I travel to try to keep that going because now I'm not eating at regular times. I'm working at
right.
regular times and doing that. So I'll get some Ambien that will help me to fall
Mhm.
asleep at that hour and get on track and do those sort of things. But it's hard. But if you set yourself up with those expectations for your brain, if you're having problems sleeping or things like that, I encourage you to try to do things each night. Maybe it's having a cup of tea. Maybe it's my dad, it was doing the crossword puzzle for him.
Right.
Whatever that is, but doing it the same way as many nights a week as you can and having those rituals and having that scheduled time. It was a huge thing for me and something I didn't even realize I was doing until I looked back and saw what was the same with each day, and it was
The
that
pattern
nighttime
that occur
ritual.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, I try to read every night before once I get into bed, we both read, and,
Yeah.
yeah, and same, I try to stick to it's hard, I part of it is just our brains have been trained for shorter form content because of the web and the internet and everything, but I try to read books, right, fiction books, just to, A, keep that skill going, a lifetime reader, but also just like you said, don't worry about the work stuff. It'd be very easy in my field to read about tech stuff, 24/7 if I
Right, yeah,
wanted to.
continue to learn, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that's great. I encourage people to do
Yeah.
that, but you have to separate you have to have work-life balance.
That's right.
I realized when I left Microsoft, where I'd be going into the office 1, 2 days a week, that I was now at home all the time, was not engaging with new people, so I now
Right.
volunteer for 4 hours every Sunday at a local zoo, and
Right.
I spend
Which
4
is
hours as
amazing.
a docent, and I walk around and every time before I'm gonna go, I'm like, "Oh, I'm not in the mood for this." And when I get done, I'm like, "I'm so glad I did that because it's 4 hours of not thinking about anything except chatting with folks and talking about the animals and helping out and doing that. And
Yeah.
it has been so great in helping me to sort of reset my brain and get ready for the week. And keeping social skills going, just small talk and things like that.
Right.
Finding that gap and doing that has been a really important thing for me for mental health, and
Right.
I didn't realize how much until I did. So finding things like that, finding those types of things that work well for you are that. And there's great activity books too for adults, for neurodiversity, for things you
Yes.
can do in bed. List your top 10 favorite whatever, or what would you do in this situation, that encourages you to be creative and use other parts of your brain that you
Mhm.
can find at bookstores. I've seen a ton of them, and I'm like, "Oh, that's a really great idea," things along that line.
Yep.
What are 2 or 3 habits that you would recommend for someone who's now dealing with this as they're going through it? They've recognized this, they're hopefully going to their doctors and talking about it. What are 2 or 3 things that has really helped you to get,
Well, I
better?
mean, first of all, this is not so much a habit, but you have to advocate for yourself, right? That's the first thing.
Yes.
You talked about this briefly, but I really want to emphasize how important this was for me. You did not let me go. You know, I you we talked in July and you kept coming back and saying, "How's it going? How's it going? What do you do?" And you were very good about that. And I cannot even begin to explain how important that was. And you've continued, right? I mean, you'll ping me every so often and say, "Let's talk. What's going on?" You're great about that. And I having people like that in your life is it's a blessing, but it's so important. I mean, that's a big part of it. In my own role, whatever that might be. I've always been kind of transparent, and not through any plot or plan on my part, but I've been writing. I write sometimes in an editorial sense about some personal things on my own site, and I've written about this kind of stuff and the physical health stuff. And what you discover is that there's a lot of people like us, and
Yeah.
they appreciate this being expressed out in public and in a way that's not embarrassing or and just trying to be open to this kind of thing, I think, is a big deal. I talk to my own friends, the kids, the guys, the 50-something-year-old men I grew up with, and when I see them when I go back to Boston, for example, and, we're all going through the same life phase or whatever, we're having the same kind of physical challenges, but, I've talked to them about the mental stuff, and this
Yeah.
is, they're it's uncomfortable for them, but I feel that it's important to do that. You asked me about the kids and how that's changed. I mean, because of my daughter and her kind of trailblazing this path, really, that was not a problem. But Mark is our son has been incredible, and they, I, I don't get. I mean, it's like they're my kids. It's not like they're complimenting me all the time, but you do get those moments where they're like, nice, like you're doing something,
Yeah.
and living by example it is in some ways its own. Um, strategy, right? I mean, we can't change the world, right? And look, we're not subject experts per se on this topic beyond the fact that we are in some ways experts because we have it and we understand it better now.
Right.
Um, but we can at least tell the story and people, some people are going to be like, "Yep, oh, this is what I needed. I'm going to go do this now. I'm going to talk to my doctor. I'm going to see what can happen here." Some people are going to say, "Nope, they're not there yet," right? And maybe they never will be, but
Right.
at least, putting it out there is so important, which is why when you were talking about doing this episode, yeah, of course. I mean, this is a no-brainer. If there's anyone out there who I'm not going to be calling you like Stephen called me, right? But uh, but if this helps even like a single person, I hope it's more than that, honestly. But
Yeah.
just helping others is just that would just make this all worthwhile. I mean, um, I don't know. I honestly, a lot of it's just self-awareness.
Yeah.
And not just self-awareness, but understanding what it is that's happening, right? I talked about that freak out and how at the time to me this was a positive, and then kind of seeing it from a different angle and realizing, there are better ways to handle this that are healthier and better for everyone around you too, right? You don't want to have that. It's kind of sobering to realize the negative impact you can have on the people you care about the most, right? And you don't need it.
Absolutely.
You know?
No, and therapy is so important because as I started going through this, I realized my parents say, "Oh, he's a C student, he's a plugger, da
Yeah,
da da." And I realized, no, I didn't need to be a C student or a plugger. I got A's in
yeah,
classes I liked and didn't do well in other ones
right.
because I was struggling and my brain couldn't
Or you
work
just
that
didn't
way.
you were just not
And
engaged. It was boring,
no, right. And it's
depending
not
on the
my
topic.
parents' fault because they came from a generation that didn't
Right.
know how to deal with this. But I was thinking, oh my God, if I would have been diagnosed earlier in life and what
Mhm.
I did, I just realized how much extra effort and energy I had to put in to do things, sometimes 2 to 4 times more than someone who was neurotypical would have had to do. And when you
Right,
think about how much more you have to do basic things, which you just
right.
start to accept as that's just the way that things are, it takes me longer or I'm more exhausted, you start to go, "Oh my god, your brain was trying to do what equals 4 of these or 6 of these in the same time or the same space that someone else was doing that." And you finally get to this point, you look back and you're like, "I've been working really hard, almost too hard to do simple things that now I can do much easier and have time left over and feel good." And I you look back, but you can't look back with, "Oh my god, if I would have known." You have to go, "Starting today, I see that things are better, and I'm just gonna appreciate that and enjoy that and not go back to, 'Oh my god, what if I would have done this sooner?'" Because it's the one thing that everybody says, "I wish I would have done this sooner,"
Of
and
course. Yeah.
you're doing it now. That's what's
Look,
important.
yeah, the good news here is that for people of our children's age, the world is a much better place in this regard than it was when we were that age. And so, in a way, there's a
Yeah,
hole here of people our age who grew up in that era and are not being taken care of, and and unfortunately, you have to sort of self advocate still because you're not going to get it um, externally for the most part. Although, like you helped and my wife tried to help. Um, but it's interesting, my son who was deaf and had cochlear implants, if he grew up with me, would have been shunted off to a special skill center area. I would never would have met him, you know. He was
right.
mainstreamed into the same exact school system I went to. It's a completely different world, and that was now 20 years ago. Flash forward to
Yeah,
today, it's even better, and now we're finally hitting on this kind of mental health thing. But don't I guess don't feel bad that you haven't done it sooner because honestly, there probably was no opportunity for that. And as you said, with the drugs that were available, if that's what you need back 20 years ago, those were terrible anyway. So it's a better world for this now. It's the right time,
mhm,
and don't let it, don't keep going the same way. I mean, I at least have the conversation,
yeah,
whether it's with a
I agree.
spouse or family member, friend, doctor, therapist, whatever. Get it
Yeah.
started.
In wrap up, many of you have insurance plans that allows you to see a mental health
Hmm.
professional, sometimes through,
Right.
direct or indirect. If you feel that's something you would benefit from, take advantage of it. Go out and there are tons of online um, things that you can do from good sources that will walk you through and help you to understand what are the issues that you may have. Go see your
Hmm.
doctor and talk to your doctor. Look at seeing a therapist or psychiatrist and ask, are these things normal? And I'm not saying that medication is the answer for everything. Please don't get that wrong. But
No.
medication can help. And it did not
Yeah.
dull me or keep me from doing my job. It made me sharper and allowed me to
This
do my
was
job
yes.
better.
This was the fear I had. What if I take a drug and it takes away the thing that is makes me successful or whatever it is, right? The
Right?
thing that makes me me, you know? And, it's been described to me in different ways, but, I don't know if it's you or my daughter or somebody said to me, "Honestly, it's probably gonna amplify the things that you like about you, and it's gonna
Right.
dull the things that you don't like about you," right? It's not you're not getting a lobotomy, it's not Planet of the Apes, right? Like, um, I it's restored a sense of balance for me.
Yeah.
Um, it can be tricky, because for a while, especially, and maybe forever, you have to kind of tweak it from time to time. That's an aspect of it I don't like. I don't like to take medication. For one thing, I'd like to be off of medication, all medication. I don't want to take any medication. But um, I was I was very happy to find out that my doctor, how open she was to all of this, not just the physical stuff, but the mental health care, and she's been great, and I think that's important. I don't think I
Yeah.
think people dread doctors' visits, of course they do, lie to
Yeah.
doctors, try to get out of there as quickly as possible, and I have a completely different relationship with my doctor now than I've ever had in my entire life, and it's excellent. It's just excellent.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I thank my doctor for saving my life in a way, not that I was going to die, but I'm
Yeah.
now enjoying life and enjoyed the time when my daughter was home more and found new success. And I don't think the transition that I had last year working for Microsoft and going to work on my own, that I would have
Yeah.
been able to do it in the mental state that I was
Yep.
in before or handle it that well. And think that
Yeah.
that says a lot. So
Yep.
share this. Hopefully, you have found, within this that you're feeling a little less alone, or it's given you some thoughts. I
Right.
encourage you, reach out to me via email, reach out to Paul via email or in the comments. I've read the comments, Paul, on some of the articles that you've
Mhm.
written, and you've called me out, and I appreciate it. And some of the things that people have said, and help
Well,
others
listen,
around you. Have
you've
those
you
conversations.
talked about a doctor who saved your life. I mean, in many ways, you've done that for me as well. I mean, don't let my wife hear me say that, but she's still a little sore about that. But she tried. Yeah, no, I mean, it meant a lot to me. It means a lot to me.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, that's the goal, and now you need to help someone else. You need to find someone who's
Yeah,
going through that and be there for them, and that's
mhm,
how you repay that is
that's right.
and I share this with people. I'm like, "You're not alone. You're feeling
Hmm.
guilt, don't feel guilt, and how this is affecting." Then they come back and they're like and I'm like, "Don't ever say, 'I wish I would have done this sooner.' You're doing it now, and you're
Right.
doing it for the right reasons, and that's
You did
it."
it. Yeah,
Guilt
well, you did it when you
yeah,
were ready and when the conditions were right for you.
right.
And
Yeah.
this is a lot of this is external. It's not just about where you're at.
Not at all. But take advantage, go out, let us know how your journey is, and
Mhm.
make this the year that you put your mental health first, which will help you to put so many other things in your life first, and it will make your life better in
I
ways you cannot imagine.
It's
And
the
we say that from the
foundation.
heart.
It's the foundation for everything else in your life. I mean, you really can't be successful outside of that until you figure this part of it out. I think it's so important. You may not realize it until it's a little, until
Yeah.
after you would have wished for it, but it's true.
So on that note, we're gonna end it. I'm Stephen Rose from Unplugged
Mhm.
IT, and with me is
Paul Thurrott from Thurrott.com.
check out our other not quite as serious, podcast on timely
Yeah.
topics and IT type stuff and what's new with Copilot and Windows and Copilot coming to the individuals and all that other good stuff. We're gonna
Sure.
keep doing that,
We
but
still do the
we
tech
wanted
stuff.
to take some time out.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. This was important, and hopefully you found some value from it. So thank you, everybody. Have a great week, and from the 2 of us, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
No, 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 no.